You are not lazy. But if you keep calling it laziness, this pattern will repeat for years, silently, until it becomes your identity. If you've noticed that your life isn't moving forward the way it could, if you plan, organize, understand exactly what needs to be done, and still freeze, this is not a lack of discipline, it is an unresolved internal conflict. There is a part of you that wants to act, grow, expand. And there is another part that reacts every time you get close to that movement, not with obvious fear, but with sudden exhaustion, with distraction, with delay, with that strange feeling of not now. And when those two parts collide, the body shuts down, not because you are incapable, but because you are divided. The problem is that when this conflict goes unrecognized, it begins to collect interest. You lose opportunities. You erode your self-esteem. And slowly, you begin to believe that the problem is you. What you call laziness is actually energy at war. And as long as that war remains invisible, no change will sustain itself. If you don't understand this division, you will keep trying to fix yourself with discipline, while the real conflict remains untouched. We live under the narrative that productive people simply do what needs to be done, as if they feel no doubt, as if they carry no fear, as if action were a straight line between intention and execution. But that is a fantasy of consciousness. The conscious mind sets goals, it makes lists, it organizes. But beneath it lies another layer, less visible, older. This is where complexes live. This is where emotional memories shaped your identity. When you attempt to change a behavior, you are not merely changing a habit. You are threatening a psychological structure that was built to protect you. And that structure reacts. What we call lack of discipline is often an activated complex. An internal system that associates action with danger. Perhaps taking initiative once meant exposure. Perhaps it meant criticism. Perhaps it meant humiliating failure. Your body learned, and now it protects you by avoiding movement. This is not laziness. It is ancient self-protection operating in the present. No division appears out of nowhere. It forms when a part of you realizes it must adapt in order to survive emotionally. Maybe you learned it was better not to stand out, or safer not to try than to try and fail. So you built a persona, a functional identity, the one who seems calm, who doesn't take too many risks, who doesn't disturb the environment. This persona keeps you accepted, keeps you protected. But within it another part remains alive, the ambitious part, the creative part, the part that longs to expand. And that is precisely why it feels dangerous. Analytical psychology speaks of the shadow not as something evil, but as what was repressed so you could belong, your unused energy, your unauthorized impulses, your contained potential. When you try to act, the shadow stirs. Because action means releasing what was once contained, and releasing it threatens the stability of the persona. There is a difference between essential identity and adaptive identity. The adaptive identity was constructed in response to the environment. It is strategic, calculated, careful. It asks, what do I need to be accepted? The essential identity asks, what do I truly want? When these voices are not aligned, division emerges. You set goals based on what you think you should want, but internally, something resists. That resistance is not irrational sabotage. It is a demand for coherence. It is the psyche saying, I will not cooperate with something that fragments me. And so you enter cycles. Promise, motivation, paralysis, guilt, restart. Each cycle deepens the sense of inadequacy. When in truth, the issue is not effort, it is lack of integration. Let's name the mechanism. Repression and complex formation. When an intense emotional experience cannot be processed, it becomes stored with the emotion attached to it. An autonomous core forms inside the psyche. This core is not rational, it reacts. If in the past action led to pain, shame, or rejection, the complex associates action with threat, and it activates defense, distraction, procrastination, fatigue. The body feels it before the mind understands it. You interpret it as laziness, because consciousness cannot see the complex operating. But it is there, silent, efficient, protective. This mechanism was once necessary. It may have prevented deeper pain. It may have kept you safe in an environment where mistakes were not allowed. But what was once protection can become prison. At work, you delay important projects. Not because you don't care, but because caring too much activates the fear of failing. So you do the minimum. If it fails, it hurts less. In relationships, you may avoid showing ambition, avoid vulnerability, avoid needing too much, because vulnerability was once dangerous. Better to appear detached than dependent. With money, subtle self-sabotage may appear. An unconscious fear of growing too much, being seen too much, exceeding invisible limits set in childhood. And in identity, you live divided between who you could be and who you are allowed to be. That division consumes energy, and divided energy looks like laziness. But it is not lack of strength, it is unresolved conflict. Over time, division collects interest, not only in lost opportunities, but in eroded self-worth. You begin to internalize the narrative of incapacity. Repetition solidifies identity. This is just who I am. What began as protection becomes character definition. Internally, chronic frustration builds, a sense of unlived potential, a constant tension between desire and containment. And perhaps the most painful part, the feeling of watching your life instead of inhabiting it. The conflict does not disappear. It internalizes as self-criticism. Integration means allowing repressed parts back into consciousness, ambition, anger, desire, vulnerability, and that is frightening. Because if you integrate that energy, you will have to change, and change implies grief. Grief for the old identity, for the predictable version of yourself. There is also the fear of failing without the excuse of laziness. If you are not lazy, then what happens when you try and fail? The protective narrative disappears. Laziness, paradoxically, offers safety. It explains stagnation. It removes real risk. Integration means accepting that you are more powerful than your persona allowed, and that demands responsibility. Depth psychology calls this process individuation, becoming whole. Not perfect, whole. It does not happen through brute force. It does not happen through self-accusation. It happens through inner listening, through curiosity toward resistance. When you notice procrastination, instead of attacking yourself, you ask, what is this part protecting? The answer may surprise you. Perhaps it protects a child who learned that mistakes were dangerous. Perhaps it protects an adolescent who was ridiculed for trying. Integration does not eliminate fear. It recognizes its origin and updates its function. You are not lazy. You are fragmented. And fragmentation is not resolved through pressure. It is resolved through awareness. The part that wants to act and the part that wants to protect must enter dialogue. They must understand that the context has changed, that the past is not the present. The energy that now manifests as paralysis is the same energy that can become movement once it is no longer at war. Perhaps the first step is not doing more, but listening more, observing the conflict without reducing it to moral failure. Because when you stop accusing yourself and start investigating yourself, something shifts. The division begins to narrow, and the energy that was blocked finds direction. If this resonated with you, stay here. This channel is for people who see too much and are learning how to live with it.